When we think about identity, most people imagine it as something fixed, something given at birth, determined by personality, family, or circumstance. But if you look deeper, you'll realize identity is not something handed to you. It is something you construct moment by moment through the conversations you have with yourself. Your self-talk is the invisible architect of who you become. The truth is we don't live with reality directly. We live with our interpretation of it. And the interpretation is shaped by the words running through our own minds. Every time you face a challenge, every time you stumble, every time you succeed, the story you tell yourself about that event becomes the building block of your identity. If you fall and you tell yourself, I'm a failure, I'm weak, I can't handle life, that story becomes part of who you think you are. But if after the same fall you tell yourself, this hurts, but I can get back up, I can endure, I can learn, then that narrative builds a different self. Identity then is not a static object. It is a story that is constantly rewritten. And the author of that story is you through the way you speak to yourself in the silence of your mind. This is why two people can grow up in the same environment, face similar hardships, and yet become entirely different human beings. One person's self-talk is saturated with defeat. Life is unfair. Nothing works for me. People are against me. And so they live out that identity of victimhood. The other person, despite facing the same pain, tells themselves, this is hard, but I will fight. I will not be defined by what others tried to make of me. And they grow into resilience, into strength. The difference is not luck or fate. It's the dialogue they chose to have with themselves. And make no mistake, this dialogue is not passive, it is powerful. The human mind is built to believe repetition. The words you repeat inside your head become convictions, convictions become actions, actions form habits, and habits crystallize into identity. So if you're telling yourself day after day that you're not good enough, you will live as though it's true. But if you repeat with clarity and honesty that you are capable of becoming stronger, then that belief reshapes your behavior, and your behavior reshapes your life. But here's where it gets complicated. Not all of your inner dialogue originates from you. Much of it is inherited. The voices of your parents, your teachers, your culture, sometimes even your abusers become the voices inside your head. If you were told as a child you're worthless, you'll never amount to anything, chances are that voice still lingers in your self-talk today, and so you carry someone else's judgment as if it were your own truth. This is one of the great psychological tragedies of human life. People spend decades living out identities that were scripted for them by others, but you are not condemned to that script. The very fact that you are aware of your inner dialogue means you have the ability to change it. You can pause, listen, and ask, whose voice is this? Do I truly believe this? Or am I just repeating someone else's limitations? That awareness is the beginning of freedom. Think about it. If you realize that a cruel, dismissive voice in your head doesn't belong to your authentic self, but to a parent who couldn't love you properly, then suddenly you're not just repeating self-hatred, you're breaking free from it. If you can recognize that your identity has been shaped by unchallenged self-talk, then you can start reshaping it consciously. And reshaping doesn't mean replacing every negative thought with empty positivity. That's not self-talk. That's self-deception. True identity is built not on denial, but on truth spoken clearly. So instead of saying, I'm perfect, I'm flawless, I'm amazing, which your psyche knows is false, you say, I'm imperfect, but I am capable of growth. I am broken in places, but I am not beyond repair. I can become better than I was yesterday. That is honest. That is believable, and when repeated, that becomes the foundation of real strength. The conversations you have with yourself are not small. They are the most important conversations of your life. Because here's the paradox: the world will treat you often the way you treat yourself. If you carry yourself as though you are worthless, others will sense it. If you believe you have no power, you will live powerless. But if you anchor your self-talk in strength, in resilience, in honesty, you begin to radiate that into the world, and the world responds. That's why your inner dialogue is not just shaping your identity privately. It is shaping the way others see you, the way they interact with you, and the way you influence the environment around you. Your self-talk is not confined to your head. It leaks into your tone, your posture, your decisions, your relationships. In that sense, your identity is not just personal, it is relational. So when you speak to yourself, you are not just deciding who you will be in private, you are deciding how you will exist in the world. Will you be someone who collapses under the weight of life's chaos? Or someone who bears it with dignity and strength? Will you be someone who repeats the old wounds of the past? Or someone who builds something new from the rubble? The answer lies in the words you tell yourself every day. And so if you want to change your life, begin with the simplest, hardest step. Change the way you speak to yourself. Catch the moments when your inner critic tries to reduce you. Confront it. Replace it with a voice of discipline, honesty, and encouragement. Because in the end, you are not just living life. You are living the story you keep telling yourself about life. And the story you tell becomes the person you are. When we speak about the conversations we have with ourselves, most people assume it's something small, something insignificant, just fleeting thoughts in the mind. But in reality, self-talk is far more than background noise. It is the lens through which you experience life. Every moment, every challenge, every interaction is filtered through the ongoing dialogue in your head. And that dialogue has the power to either distort reality or clarify it, to shrink your world or to expand it. Consider this: two people can experience the exact same event, a setback at work, a betrayal from a friend, or even something as small as being ignored in a conversation. And yet their interpretations, their emotional responses can be worlds apart. Why? Because it isn't the event itself that determines how we feel. It is the story we tell ourselves about that event. One person says, "I must not be good enough. That's why this happened to me." Another person says, "This is painful, but it's a test. Maybe it's an opportunity to grow stronger, to sharpen my skills, to learn." The event is the same, but the reality is entirely different, and the difference lies in self-talk. Your inner dialogue doesn't just reflect your mood, it creates it. It doesn't just describe reality, it defines it. Think of self-talk as the glasses you wear every day. If those glasses are clouded with negativity, fear, and self-doubt, everything you see outside becomes tinted with that darkness. Obstacles appear insurmountable, people appear untrustworthy, and your own potential appears small. But if those glasses are sharpened with clarity, discipline, and encouragement, the same world looks different. Challenges look like opportunities, setbacks look like stepping stones, and the future looks open rather than closed. This is not just psychological theory, it is lived experience. Imagine waking up in the morning. If your first thought is, "Another day, nothing ever changes, I can't handle this," you've already programmed yourself to approach the day with defeat. The smallest inconvenience will feel unbearable. But if your self-talk begins with, "It will be difficult, but I am capable of facing what comes," your reality shifts. The tasks are still hard, but now you interpret them through strength instead of weakness. And that difference compounds over time until it defines the trajectory of your entire life. One of the great tragedies I see in people is how unconscious their self-talk really is. They speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they love. They insult themselves. They dismiss their potential. They constantly remind themselves of failures, but rarely affirm their strengths. And because they repeat this daily, they begin to believe it. This is how people build prisons inside their own minds. The bars are not made of iron. They are made of words. But here's the deeper psychological truth. The inner dialogue you live with isn't always truly yours. Much of it is borrowed. It comes from the voices of your parents, your teachers, your culture, and sometimes from people who hurt you. If you grew up in an environment where you were constantly criticized, then your inner critic likely speaks in the same tone. If you were told you're not enough, then your self-talk repeats that narrative. This means that when you hear yourself say, "I can't do this," it might not even be your authentic voice. It's an echo of someone else's judgment that you've internalized. Most of us live with a voice in our head that isn't fully ours. It sounds like us, but if you trace it back, you'll find it often belongs to someone else. The critical parent who never let you feel enough, the teacher who humiliated you in front of the class, the friend who betrayed you, even culture itself whispering its expectations and judgments into your mind. Over time, those voices merge into what you believe is your self-talk. But here's the problem, you take them as truth. And so you carry within you an internal script that is not only outdated, but destructive, one that keeps replaying long after the original characters have left the stage. So that is why rewriting your inner script becomes an act of freedom. Because until you do, you're not really living by choice. You're living by programming. And the programming, most of the time, was never designed for your flourishing. It was designed for control, or at best, survival. If your self-talk constantly tells you that you're unworthy, that you'll never succeed, that you should be afraid, that isn't you speaking. That's residue, it's borrowed language. And here's the truth, just because you inherited those words doesn't mean you have to keep them. The first step is awareness. You have to catch the voice in action. That moment when you make a mistake and you hear yourself say, "I'm so stupid," pause right there. Whose voice is that, really? Did you come into the world believing you were stupid? Or did someone plant that seed and you've been watering it unconsciously ever since? When you identify the origin of a toxic belief, it loses part of its grip. Because now you see it's not eternal truth, it's conditioning, but awareness alone isn't enough. You have to deliberately rewrite the script. And this isn't about blind positivity. It's not about lying to yourself with empty affirmations. No. It's about truth, the kind of truth that liberates. If the old script says, you'll always fail, the new script isn't, I'll always succeed, that's too shallow. The new script is, failure is part of growth, but I am capable of learning and moving forward. That is truthful, that is strong, that becomes a foundation, not a fantasy. Rewriting the script also means responsibility. Because the moment you recognize your inner dialogue can be changed, you can no longer blame your past for the way you speak to yourself now. Yes, others may have written the first draft of your inner voice, but you're the one holding the pen today. Every time you repeat a thought, you reinforce it. Every time you catch a destructive sentence and replace it with a constructive one, you're reshaping the architecture of your mind. Neuroscience backs this up. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition. Your brain rewires around the language you choose to honor. This is why freedom comes not in a single dramatic moment, but in countless small ones. The moment you wake up and tell yourself, today I am capable of facing what comes, instead of today is going to crush me. The moment you choose to respond to failure with, what can I learn? Instead of, I'll never get it right. These shifts seem small, but they accumulate, they build a different future brick by brick. And here's the paradox. When you change your inner script, the world itself begins to respond differently to you. People treat you according to how you carry yourself. If your self-talk is full of shame and weakness, it leaks out, you move timidly, you shrink, you avoid eye contact. But when your self-talk is firm, respectful, courageous, it radiates outward. Suddenly, you set boundaries. You take risks. You pursue opportunities. In a very real sense, by rewriting the script within, you re-script the stage outside. But I want to warn you, rewriting the script is not easy. The old voices are stubborn. They've lived rent-free in your mind for years, even decades. They will try to come back. Sometimes they'll whisper, sometimes they'll shout, and that's why this work requires persistence. It's not about perfection, it's about consistency. If you correct your self-talk 100 times in a week, you're training a new pattern. If you give up after 5, the old voices win. The discipline lies in catching yourself again and again until the new voice, your voice, becomes stronger than the old. And here's the most profound part. When you master the conversations you have with yourself, you are no longer a prisoner of the past. You no longer have to replay old pain as if it defines you forever. You can honor your experiences, but you don't have to live inside them. Rewriting the script is rewriting your future. Because the person who speaks to you in your head all day long, that's the person you become. So if the question is, who am I? The answer is, you are, in large part, the story you keep telling yourself. Change the story, and you change the self. Change the self, and you change the life. And that's the challenge I leave you with. Don't hand the pen of your destiny to voices that never cared for you. Pick it up yourself, write words worth living by, because the conversation never stops, but whether it builds you or destroys you, that's your choice.